Imagine almost losing the miracle that could change the course of your life because of your ego. That was the experience of Naaman, a powerful, admired and feared general who nearly missed the greatest blessing of his life because he clung to his pride. Today we'll dive into this fascinating story that teaches us how humility can open doors to miracles, while ego often keeps them shut. Naaman was the commander of the Syrian army, a man of great influence and respect. He had achieved significant victories and was treated almost like a divine figure, revered by everyone around him. But behind all this glory lay a bitter reality. Naaman suffered from leprosy, an incurable disease that, at the time, was seen as both a physical curse and a social stigma. Even though his armor concealed the marks of the disease, Naaman knew that sooner or later leprosy would expose his vulnerability. He longed for something that wealth, power and military victories couldn't bring: healing. Deep down, he also yearned for something greater, a direct encounter with God, something that would affirm his significance even in the eyes of the divine. But his quest for this miracle was deeply tied to his ego, and that would make his journey all the more challenging. In Naaman's story, we'll see how he had to confront not just leprosy, but also the pride that almost kept him from receiving his miracle. His story teaches us that before God, status, wealth, and power mean nothing. What truly matters is humility and faith. Have you or someone you know ever experienced a moment where pride or doubt stood in the way of something important? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear how you or someone close to you overcame that challenge. If you believe that God has a great miracle reserved for your life, show your humility by liking this video right now. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any inspiring stories like this, and share this message with someone who needs to believe in the power of God. Now that we've set the stage for this incredible story, let's discover who Naaman was and how his desire for something grand shaped his journey. Naaman was no ordinary man. He was the commander of the Syrian army, a man whose name struck fear into enemies and inspired reverence among his people. Known for his strategic brilliance and countless victories, Naaman was the very image of success and power. He had wealth, influence, and the loyalty of those under his command. Yet, behind his armor, he carried a painful secret. He was afflicted with leprosy. At the time, leprosy was not just a physical ailment, it was a condition that brought immense social and emotional suffering. The disease slowly disfigured the body, alienated the afflicted, and was often seen as a divine punishment. For someone of Naaman's stature, this was a devastating blow. His external power was unmatched, but internally, he felt powerless. He lived with the fear that one day his illness would strip away everything he had worked so hard to build. But Naaman's story isn't just about seeking physical healing, it's about a deeper longing, a desire for something greater than himself. As a man accustomed to being at the center of attention, Naaman didn't just want to be healed. He wanted to experience a direct encounter with the divine, something that would affirm his importance even to God. This yearning for validation from the Almighty was intertwined with his ego, which saw him not as an ordinary man, but as someone deserving of extraordinary treatment. Naaman envisioned a miraculous healing that matched his grandeur. Perhaps a prophet would perform an elaborate ritual, or the heavens would open in a dramatic display of divine power. But he had yet to learn that God often works in ways that challenge human expectations, especially those fueled by pride. His journey begins not with a grand revelation, but with a simple suggestion from an unexpected source. Little did Naaman know that his path to healing and transformation would not align with the image he had created for himself. The miracle he sought would require him to confront the very pride that defined his identity. Naaman's Desire for a connection with God set the stage for his journey, but it also exposed the barriers within his heart. How could a man who was treated as a living legend come to terms with the idea that, in the eyes of God, his power and status meant nothing? As we continue this story, we'll see how an unlikely encounter with a humble servant sets Naaman on the road to healing. But first, he would have to confront a reality he wasn't ready to face, that the first step to his miracle would come not from his greatness, but from the simplicity of obedience and faith. Naaman's path to healing didn't begin with a grand ceremony or a divine vision. It started with the words of someone most people in his position would overlook, a young servant girl from Israel. She worked in Naaman's household, serving his wife, and she had witnessed the silent suffering that the great general endured. Despite her lowly position, she carried a deep faith in the God of Israel and believed that he alone could provide the healing Naaman so desperately needed. One day, the servant girl spoke to Naaman's wife and said, "If only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." Her words were simple, but they carried profound hope. What's remarkable is that this suggestion came from someone society considered insignificant, yet it planted the first seed of possibility in Naaman's journey. For a man of Naaman's status, taking advice from a servant girl was humbling in itself, but the idea of traveling to Israel, an enemy nation, to seek help from an unfamiliar prophet was even more challenging. Still, the desperation to be healed outweighed his pride, and Naaman chose to act on the suggestion. But even as he prepared for the journey, Naaman did so in a way that reflected his status and expectations. He loaded his caravan with extravagant gifts, gold, silver, and fine clothing, believing that these would secure him the attention and favor of the prophet. To Naaman, everything had a price, and he intended to pay whatever it cost to receive his miracle. What Naaman didn't realize yet was that his journey wasn't just about seeking healing, it was about transforming his heart. The servant girl's suggestion was the first test of his humility, but many more would come. His willingness to listen to someone so insignificant in the world's eyes was the beginning of a series of moments that would challenge his pride and reshape his understanding of what it truly means to receive from God. As we move forward, Naaman's journey takes him to the prophet Elisha, but what he finds there will completely defy his expectations and test his pride like never before. The beginning of Naaman's journey toward his miracle came from the most unlikely of sources, a young servant girl. This girl, captured from Israel and now serving in Naaman's household, was a figure of no importance in the grand scheme of Syrian society. Yet it was her words that would set in motion the chain of events leading to his healing. Seeing her master's suffering, the servant spoke boldly to Naaman's wife, suggesting that he visit a prophet in Israel named Elisha. "If only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy," she said. With unwavering faith, her words were simple, but filled with conviction. For Naaman, this suggestion was not easy to accept. He was a mighty general, a man used to being surrounded by powerful leaders and advisors. How could the solution to his problem come from a lowly servant? And how could the answer lie in a foreign land, among the Israelites, a people the Syrians often looked down upon? Yet, desperation has a way of softening even the hardest of hearts. Leprosy was a disease that no wealth or influence could cure, and Naaman, though proud, was not blind to the gravity of his situation. After hearing his wife relay the servant's words, he decided to act. He sought the approval of the king of Syria, who sent him with a letter to the king of Israel, along with lavish gifts, silver, gold, and fine clothing, as if these material treasures could secure the healing he sought. Here we see the first test of Naaman's pride. The Journey to Israel was not just a physical one, it was a step toward humility. Naaman, a man who believed his greatness entitled him to answers, was about to learn that the path to healing would require him to listen to those he deemed beneath him. Little did Naaman know, this would not be the last time his pride would be challenged. As his journey continued, he would soon find himself face to face with instructions that tested the very core of his ego. Next, we'll follow Naaman to the doorstep of Elisha, where his expectations would once again collide with divine simplicity. Naaman's journey to Israel was nothing short of grand. Accompanied by his servants, he carried with him a fortune in gifts: 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of fine clothing. To Naaman, these offerings were a testament to his power and a way to ensure he received the respect and attention he believed he deserved. He wasn't just traveling for a miracle. He was arriving as a man of importance, expecting to be treated accordingly. When Naaman reached the palace of the king of Israel, the reception did not go as he had planned. The king, upon reading the letter sent by the king of Syria, was distressed and alarmed. "Am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this man send someone to me to be cured of his leprosy?" he exclaimed, tearing his robes in frustration. The king misunderstood the letter's intent, interpreting it as a provocation for conflict. But Elisha, the prophet of Israel, heard about the king's reaction and intervened. "Let him come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel," Elisha said. Naaman's journey then took him to Elisha's humble home, far removed from the grandeur of palaces or the formalities of royal courts. This was the moment Naaman had been anticipating. He likely imagined a dramatic encounter, a grand ceremony where Elisha would come out to meet him, call upon the name of the Lord, and perform a powerful ritual to cleanse his leprosy. But what happened next shattered those expectations. Elisha didn't even come out to greet him. Instead, the prophet sent a messenger with a simple instruction: "Go, wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be cleansed." To Naaman, this was an insult. He was furious. How could a prophet, someone representing the God of Israel, treat him, a man of such status, with such disregard? He had traveled far, brought lavish gifts, and expected to be honored. Instead, he was treated like an ordinary man. Naaman's pride swelled, and he lashed out in frustration. "I thought he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the spot and cure me of my leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be cleansed?" His anger was fueled by both disappointment and humiliation. He had envisioned a cure that matched his greatness, something extraordinary, and instead he was asked to perform a mundane act in a river he considered inferior to those of his homeland. In his mind, the simplicity of the command was an affront to his dignity. For a moment it seemed as though Naaman might walk away from his miracle. His pride clouded his judgment, and the thought of obeying such a simple and undignified instruction was almost unbearable. This was more than a test of faith. It was a direct challenge to his ego. But Naaman's story doesn't end here. His servants, who had journeyed with him, saw the situation differently. They understood that this was not about grandeur or ceremony, but about obedience. In the next chapter, we'll see how their wisdom and encouragement played a crucial role in guiding Naaman toward the miracle that awaited him. Naaman stood at a crossroads, his emotions swirling with anger and frustration. How could he, a man of such importance, lower himself to follow the instructions of a prophet who hadn't even bothered to meet him in person? The idea of stepping into the muddy waters of the Jordan River felt like an insult to everything he represented. His pride screamed for him to turn around and leave. But in the midst of this inner turmoil, the voices of his servants broke through. These loyal companions who had walked the journey with him saw the simplicity of the situation for what it was. They approached him with humility and reason, offering words that would ultimately change the course of his life. "Master," they said, "if the prophet had told you to do something great, would you not have done it? How much more then when he tells you, 'Wash and be cleansed'?" Their words struck a chord. Naaman was a man who had achieved greatness through strategy and wisdom, yet here he was, blinded by his pride. His servant's question forced him to reflect. Was he truly willing to let his ego stand in the way of his healing? What did he have to lose by simply obeying the prophet's instruction? This was a pivotal moment in Naaman's story. He began to see that the path to his miracle required something far greater than wealth, power, or status. It required humility. The act of washing in the Jordan wasn't about the water or the river itself. It was about obedience and faith in a power greater than his own. Reluctantly, but with a growing sense of determination, Naaman decided to follow Elisha's instructions. He stepped down from his chariot, removed his armor, and waded into the waters of the Jordan. With each step, he shed a piece of his pride, humbling himself before the God of Israel. One time he immersed himself, nothing happened. A second time, then a third, and still no change. Doubts surely crept into his mind, but he continued, driven now by the hope that this act of faith might truly lead to his healing. By the seventh time, as he emerged from the water, something miraculous happened. His skin was restored, not just healed, but made as smooth and pure as that of a child. The leprosy that had plagued him for so long was gone. This was more than a physical transformation. In that moment, Naaman realized the true lesson. It wasn't the grandeur of the act that mattered, but the willingness to submit to God's will. His healing was a testament to the power of humility and faith, a lesson that no wealth or power could ever teach. Next, we'll witness how this miracle not only changed Naaman's body but transformed his heart and his understanding of the one true God. Naaman stood in awe, gazing at his hands. The skin that had once been marred by the unmistakable marks of leprosy was now smooth and unblemished, like that of a child. It wasn't just a physical healing, it was a moment of profound transformation. As he emerged from the waters of the Jordan, Naaman realized that what had just occurred was far greater than he had anticipated. This was more than a miraculous cure. It was a revelation. Naaman, a man who had come seeking healing for his body, found something infinitely more valuable, a true encounter with the God of Israel. The simplicity of the act, dipping into the river 7 times, had humbled him, stripping away the layers of pride that had shielded his heart. He now understood that the power of God was not confined to grand displays or ceremonies, but was revealed through obedience and faith. Naaman's journey back to Elisha was different from his arrival. When he first came, he was adorned in his finest garments, bearing treasures to impress and win favor. Now he returned as a man transformed, carrying with him not pride, but gratitude and reverence. Standing before Elisha, Naaman made a declaration that marked the turning point of his life. "Now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel." These words carried the weight of his newfound faith. Naaman, who had been a servant of other gods and cultures, now recognized the sovereignty of the one true God. In his gratitude, Naaman offered the treasures he had brought to Elisha, but the prophet refused them. This act further underscored the lesson Naaman had learned. God's miracles cannot be bought or earned. They are acts of grace, available to all who are willing to humble themselves and believe. But Naaman's transformation didn't stop there. Aware that his life would now be different, he sought permission to take some of Israel's soil back to Syria so he could worship the God of Israel in his homeland. Even as a man of high rank, serving under a pagan king, Naaman resolved to honor the God who had healed him. His faith had not only restored his body, but also reshaped his priorities and his purpose. This moment encapsulates the heart of Naaman's story. The greatest miracles often come not in the way we expect, but in the way we need. His journey wasn't just about the curing of a disease. It was about the transformation of a soul. The man who once saw himself as superior because of his status now stood as a testament to the power of humility and obedience. As Naaman departed from Elisha, he carried more than just the memory of a miraculous healing. He carried a renewed spirit, a heart humbled by grace, and a life forever changed by the hand of God. Next, we'll reflect on the powerful lessons from Naaman's story and how they apply to our own lives. Naaman's story is a powerful reminder of how pride can become the greatest barrier between us and the blessings God has for our lives. At the beginning of his journey, Naaman was a man defined by his status, his power, and his expectations. He believed that his position entitled him to a miraculous healing on his terms, dramatic, grand, and befitting his reputation. Yet God's plan for him was different. It was through the simplicity of obedience and the humility of faith that Naaman found both healing and transformation. This story speaks to all of us. How often do we let our own pride, doubts, or preconceived notions keep us from experiencing the fullness of what God wants to do in our lives? Like Naaman, we may have a clear idea of how we expect God to act, only to find that his ways challenge us to let go of our ego and trust in his plan. Naaman's healing came not through the grandeur of his gifts or the influence of his position, but through an act of submission. The Jordan River wasn't special because of its waters. It was significant because it represented Naaman's willingness to obey. His immersion in the river wasn't just about cleansing his skin, it was about cleansing his heart of the pride that had held him captive. This lesson is timeless. God often works in ways that defy human expectations, using what is simple, humble, and even ordinary to accomplish extraordinary things. Naaman's story challenges us to reflect on our own lives. Are we holding on to pride or expectations that prevent us from receiving the miracles God has prepared for us? Now, we want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed a story like this, where someone close to you, or even yourself, overcame pride or doubt to receive a great blessing? Share your story in the comments below. It could inspire someone else who's waiting for their own miracle. If you believe that humility is the key to unlocking God's blessings in your life, let us know by liking this video and sharing it with someone who needs this message. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories that remind us of God's power and grace. Together, let's spread this powerful lesson to more hearts and lives.